If you hear any sounds in the background that sound strange, it is because today is laundry day. That's why. When you ask a Winx fan what their favorite season is, it's pretty rare for someone to say 2. And while 2 isn't my favorite either, that makes me sad, because it's definitely one of the best seasons, and was a great step up from the first season in improving the story and giving all the characters more to work with. Notably, anyone who wasn't a red-headed, flame-wielding Earthling. Season 2 is the most underrated season, with a lot of new characters who surprisingly don't feel forced into the cast, lots of new interesting character dynamics, and an expansion upon the magical universe's world building. This was vital for the show to grow into what it became during the Golden Era. Before we begin, a casual reminder, yes, I'm contractually obligated to do this, as I made a deal with myself to not be a coward on self-promotion, that my debut urban fantasy novel, Disinherbus from the Ashes, is currently available in ebook, paperback, and hardcover wherever books are sold. Christmas is coming up, after all. I doubt with the shipping that the physical versions would get to you by Christmas. I mean, I guess you could try, but, you know, treat yourself to some holiday gayness and bloodbaths. Well, it's not quite a bloodbath, but I do like to kill characters. Yeah. Some of y'all mentioned issues picking it up in international regions, specifically the Middle East, and since I used Ingram Spark for expanded distribution, I don't actually know the full extent to how many retailers carry the book online. That said, when in doubt, Google Play Books might be a good route for the ebook, especially if you can't afford the shipping costs for the physical versions wherever you live. And I also know a lot of folks would love an audiobook. That will be a goal for it next year at the earliest, as making the ebook and print versions was stressful enough. But I will keep y'all posted. Now, without further ado, let's delve into why Season 2 deserves more respect. Aisha is the best character of the franchise. I'm not even exaggerating. This is one of the few times in a franchise where a new character added to the main team feels 100% organic. To the point, seeing the group without her in Season 1 just feels wrong. The Winx Club is not complete without Aisha. Or Roxy, but that's a take for another time. Firstly, the diversity seen throughout the show, generally speaking, is a bit of a mixed bag. Especially after the whitewashing of Flora, Aisha, and Musa through the newer seasons, World of Winx, and Fate the Bad Writing Saga, it's nice going back to seeing more characters of color and interracial relationships being normalized for all the kids. There was some stumbling, though. We've mentioned issues with Naboo's death in Season 4, but another egregious moment was the mocking of black women's natural hair in Season 1. The Miss Magix episode was a mistake. It could have provided commentary on how destructive and harmful beauty standards for women can be, especially marginalized women, but instead, it just seemed to gloss over them, including that moment where a black woman is sobbing out in the hall because someone turned her hair into an afro, and Bloom touched it to make it bounce. Firstly, please don't touch other people or their hair without consent, as if they're curiosities. That's just gross. Second, the fact that this hair isn't considered desirable and is worthy of mocking is part of a long history of racism towards black people, especially black women, for their natural hair. I still can't believe 4Kids actually made a positive change in having the issue be in her voice rather than her hair. But coming off of that, the show did seem to try and ameliorate the issue by introducing a young black woman into the cast, and making her a princess nonetheless. On a representation level, Aisha is incredibly important for young black girls to see themselves reflected in their media, having pivotal roles and being worthy of friendship, love, and the ability to wipe the floor with bad guys. There's still the problem where Aisha seems to suffer more than the other Winx, what with being thrown from 1,000-foot cliffs, having her planet turned into a war zone by escaped sorcerer convicts, being blinded by said convicts, forced into arranged marriages by her traditional parents, and then having that man she was engaged to and actually fell in love with die. well, fake die, get revived by Bloom, and then die for real, leading her to turn into a vengeance-craved antagonist who disowns the other Winx in her rage. Damn, can this girl please catch a break? But I felt this was all worth mentioning, because Aisha's involvement in the series, especially as a well-written character, cannot be overstated. She's a net positive for the show, and she's honestly my second favorite Winx behind Musa. Sonic Wave for life. As a character, Aisha is immediately interesting. Season 2 begins with her right away, showing her risking her life, climbing up the side of hell castles to rescue the pixies, and taking on this world's version of the devil, and walking away alive. This girl is here to get shit done, and she lives up to that introduction as the story carries on, as we learn about her lonely childhood from her parents sheltering her away from the public and stifling her passions. The only friend she had growing up was Anne, a young girl who would sneak into the palace to dance. Not only did this friendship help Aisha to sincerely connect with someone her own age without the pretense of pleasing fellow nobility, but it also taught her to value her own freedom. Through dance, Aisha is able to express herself in ways she was never allowed to as the Princess of Andros. Not to mention, even after she moved away, Anne's stealth probably inspired Aisha to become stealthy herself, sneaking in and out of the palace just to breathe, and occasionally learn weather magic from the local farmers, apparently. It gave Aisha a rebellious side that's integral to her character. Aisha comes across as a very strong-willed person who has difficulty in starting and maintaining friendships. A lot of her story in Season 2 is feeling like she doesn't quite belong in the Winx Club, especially when Stella's prone to not counting her instinctively, or choose Aisha out for not knowing about her parents' divorce like the others. They do make up, and their friendship actually becomes one of the more endearing of the show. But it's interesting to see this conflict, as it's something I'm sure a lot of people have felt when they're trying to make new friends, or sometimes feel like they don't belong in a new friend group. This, along with the leadership and responsibility she displays when her world is in danger in Season 3, are what make Aisha arguably the best written, most complex character of the Winx, and quite possibly in the whole show. Not to mention, she has the best powers. Nick tried to rebrand her as the Fairy of Waves, but really, she's the Fairy of Fluids. Please get your mind out of the gutter. But as the Fairy of Fluids, Aisha is able to control literally any substance that's a liquid or gas. She actually doesn't even use water all that much, instead relying on plasma along with Morphix, a substance likely of her own creation. Aisha's Morphix, as the name suggests, is a pink glue-like substance that's able to assume any form she wishes, and it's nearly indestructible. From pulleys to nets to surfboards to shields, Aisha's Morphix is incredibly versatile, and has some really interesting applications that, as Winx Club Decoded mentioned in his earlier videos ranking the best powers of the show, allow Aisha to effectively replace several of the other Winx, given she's able to do what they can do with her powers. So, yeah, Aisha's a queen, and one of the best characters to come out of this whole show. And it's Season 2 that makes you fall in love with her. They did a wonderful job integrating her organically into the story and making her feel like part of the family seamlessly. As I've mentioned, Season 2 is all about character-driven stories. Because Lord Darkar is a more distant threat, it gives the characters more breathing room between plot points to do their own thing, like holding a concert, or ditching school to go to sketchy clubs, or Halloween parties on Earth. When great characters aren't constantly chained to an overarching plot, it allows for more freedom to explore aspects about them that we wouldn't have been able to see otherwise. The easiest example of this is Musa's storyline with her father. Episode 14 sets this up a bit with her having a brief clash with Stormy at Althea, where 15 is all about exploring how the death of Musa's mother has impacted her relationship with her father and her love of music. We learn that Musa's parents, Obo and Juanine, were musicians, but because of their career path, couldn't afford medicine for Juanine when she fell ill. When she died, this caused Obo to lash out, taking the brunt of his grief out on music, vowing never to pick up another instrument again. This has created a fear for Obo that if Musa pursues her musical passions, she'll end up like Juanine, one day trapped in a situation where she won't be able to take care of herself because she didn't choose a more practical profession. It's a bit odd given it leaves out the whole guardian fairy aspect, and also I'm pretty sure a place like the magical universe would have universal health care, but who cares about any of that? Those are nitpicks of conveniences that are in service of an emotional story about Musa's family. Tekna, meanwhile, runs into issues where Timmy skirts around confessing his feelings for her, and at times lets his cowardice get the better of him, which leads to Tekna resenting him. However, it also reveals Tekna has never been great with expressing her emotions, particularly her anger, leading to a breakdown of her and Timmy's communication until Timmy's newfound leadership and courage win Tekna over. He even manages to get Tekna to cry, and Tekna rarely cries. It's a story about emotional vulnerability and talking about however you're feeling, even if those feelings can be considered more unsightly. I also want to briefly mention how a lot of people view Tekna as autistic coded. Given I myself am neurotypical, I don't know if it's really my place to talk about neurodivergent representation in depth, but I did want to bring it up in some capacity. We also have Flora's crush and subsequent romance with Helia. During season 1, Flora was the only Winx who didn't have a love interest, which is nice to see given it shows that not all of the girls need obligatory relationships. Death to compulsory heterosexuality. Of course, Aisha filled that slot when she was introduced, allowing Flora to get a relationship, though Aisha having a relationship with Naboo later on, yeah, the heteronormativity is starting to creep in, but that's something to unpack another time. In any case, I am a huge fan of Flora falling head over heels for Helia. She's a sweet and caring person, and in the first season came off as a group mom, but now is showing more of her shy, gentle-hearted side. She's not sure whether she can tell Helia how she feels, because even when the odds are pointing to, yes girl, he's into you, she's not so sure he is. She's terrified of rejection. It takes her the entire season, and some prodding from Shatta, to yell out her feelings to Helia, to which Helia says he loves himself too.
Helia, I love you!
Huh? I do too. Mwah.
Well, it's more that he also loves Flora, but the way Cinnaloom's dialogue was written, it was more vague as he blew a kiss, thus leading to the legendary joke of Helia's ego. Not to mention, Helia is basically the perfect fit for Flora. He's reserved and soft-spoken, yet seems incredibly focused on whatever he's doing. That air of mystery around him vanishes after season 2, but when we meet him, the man's aura is very much enigmatic tuxedo mask energy, except marginally more useful. I also love that he's an artsy bitch who loves poetry and origami, and low-key, I would love to see him teaching Flora to embrace an artsy side to express herself, yes please. Also, appreciation that Aisha trying to integrate herself into the group was weaved into Musa and Flora's stories, with her and Musa becoming best friends because of them both being loners, and their love of dance and music respectively going hand in hand, and also Aisha telling Flora to get her shit together and just talk to Helia, only to give in and break into Helia's dorm to look for evidence of him indeed liking Flora back. Things we do for our friends. Bloom and Stella, meanwhile, don't really have much in the way of arcs this season, given they were the ones with the most focus back in season 1. Season 2 was more about giving everybody else room to shine. Bloom's journey is more about learning about her birth family, while Professor Avalon, grooms her? It's very creepy, but it's also kind of meant to be, as Avalon is a spy for Darkar, trying to get close to Bloom so they can manipulate and later control her. I do also appreciate how Bloom and Sky fight a lot this season, given they're not quite a full couple yet, and their strong personalities just keep clashing. Season 2 honestly did a great job at showing how these two are far from a fairy tale romance, while still showing that, despite that, they do still love each other, with Sky nearly dying in order to free Bloom from Darkar's influence. The later seasons would destroy this to make them incredibly boring, but what else is new? And Stella? They really leaned into her stepping on everyone else's toes. She means well, but she often doesn't think of how her actions are perceived by others. Like when she tries to set Musa up with Jared to help her get over Riven, or her getting snippy with anything that breathes. The Cloud Tower episodes show the group at a real low point where they just keep getting on each other's nerves and snapping at each other. And Stella's a huge part of that. She has to learn to see where the others are coming from and rein in some of her personality. It's not as much a full story as the other girls, but To be fair, she did get a lot to work with in season 1 and would go on to get even more story in season 3. This really comes to a head in the finale though. I've mentioned this in my old video ranking the series finales, but the old seasons really knew how to deliver a satisfying conclusion, holy crap. Season 2's finale is a siege on Shadowhaunt in order to save Bloom from Darkar, meaning the majority of these episodes follow everyone except Bloom stepping up to the plate, getting time to shine, and kicking ass. I will say I do wish the Tricks got a proper final clash with the Winx aside from them trying to destroy the owl. I'm still really bitter we never got a Charmix versus Gloomix standoff, but that aside, I love how the finale is structured. And their romantic goodbyes. They made my heart sore. This look Tekna and Timmy give each other while Timmy's in the owl, everything. Brandon calling Stella the light of my life, superior. Musa reading Riven for filth and storming off, only for Riven to pull her into a hug asking her to promise she'll come back to him. I am ugly crying. Flora rambling about how she should have told Helia how she felt sooner, and then Helia silently telling her it's okay by kissing her. I am deceased. Even Sky being clearly worried for Bloom, and Aisha telling him that they're gonna get her back no problem, being one of the depressingly rare moments of friendship between a specialist and a Winx who aren't dating. I have transcended. Also, confirmation that Aisha is indeed the best. She's the best. Oh god, and Flora using origami to send a message to Helia. It's everything. Tekna and Timmy being on the same page finally. All I've ever wanted. Riven breaking free of Darkar's spell in order to save Musa and nearly dying in the process, followed by him being healed by Bloom as Musa kisses him, then scoots away because emotions are hard. Adorable. Just yes. Yes to all of this. Yes. The world building is perhaps one of fans' favorite parts of the Winx Club franchise. The magical universe is a great setting, allowing for a virtually infinite number of unique worlds with wildly different magics, cultures, ecosystems, and stories. Season 3 is where we really started seeing more worlds beyond the futuristic world of magics, but Season 2 provided a necessary stepping stone to get our feet wet before throwing us into the deep end. Magix itself gets more exploration. Season 1 basically only showed us Magic City, the 3 colleges, along with Lake Ragaluche, a forest, and a swamp. Season 2 expands upon that, showing us a complex system of caves in the mountains looming over the horizon, home to the odd kingdom of Downland, along with Darkar's castle, which, yes, I still call Shadowhaunt because it's another case of the 4 kids' names being superior. Die mad. There's also Pixie Village and the Wildlands, making Magix feel like a far more interesting, alive setting. Lord Darkar himself is a great villain. Again, he's a far more distant threat, and I wish they did more with his connection to the ancestral witches, but Darkar himself is well designed and a great antagonist for the threat he poses. The man is literally a skeleton inhabiting knight armor with razor-sharp claws, all the color of old, dried blood. His presence cannot be understated, and the fact that as the Shadow Phoenix he is the natural opposite to Bloom makes him far more imposing. We love the lore actually serving the story and the characters. We love to see it. I absolutely love the Pixies. Something I don't think a lot of people take note of is how each Pixie is either an opposite or a complement to her bonded fairy. While Bloom is hot-headed and headstrong, Lockette is known to be a bit cowardly and shy. Amore is about as elegant and poised as Stella thinks she herself is. Chata forces Flora to come out of her shell with her boisterous personality, and is pretty much the only reason she and Helia are currently dating. Toon's uptight nature and conversation often comes into conflict with Musa's carefree, rebellious personality. Digit actually does a great job drawing out some of Tekna's more loud emotions like competitiveness, anger, and excitement, and Piff's ability to magic away Aisha's nightmares really helps to show what a soothing presence she is. There are also bits of the world building that tie into the girls' character development, which, in my opinion, is the best world building. Firstly, the introduction of Charmix not only signals the possibility for other transformations down the road, but it also is integrated into the girls growing up and reflecting on themselves. In the original version, Charmix is earned when a fairy conquers a fear, while the 4Kids dub is more focused on reflecting a part of your deeper self and overcoming some personal flaw. Personally, I like to think it's a mix of both, but it encourages the fairy to get more in touch with herself, which is a crucial step in her journey to become a guardian fairy. Bloom's is kinda bullshit. but I don't know what else we expected. Hers is received when she conquers the fear of she and her friends not being able to work together by coordinating them to work together so they don't all fall to their deaths while on vacation. Which, okay, yeah, I guess that works. Yeah, whatever. Stella's comes from empathizing with Aisha after hurting her feelings and seeing how she wants Aisha to feel welcome, connecting it to how Stella sometimes feels out of place herself, especially given outdoors stuff is not her forte. I appreciate the 4Kids dub taking the route of talking about Stella putting up walls to protect herself and tying her Charmix to taking them down to make connections with them. Musa gets her Charmix through trusting Riven when he discovers Darcy in the Wildlands. It's a cute moment to show how Riven is aware of the danger the tricks pose after being manipulated by them in Season 1, and solidifies he and Musa's bond following all the hardships on their way here. Tecna gets her Charmix by confessing her feelings to Timmy and letting herself cry, and Aisha gets hers by overcoming her fears of the dark and being alone in order to save Musa and her other friends. Flora's is very interesting, given she expresses shame in being the last Winx to get her Charmix. It happens while she's trying to heal the Tree of Life, which looks more like a flower, and later on becomes a tree in other seasons. A tree with different purposes, but I digress. After Icy nearly kills it, Flora doubts her ability to save the village, as without the Tree of Life, it's likely the pixies will die, and no new pixies will ever be born. Farragonda tells Flora that she has to act now, and with Helia's silent encouragement, just being there with her, Flora is able to save the tree. But that's not how she gets her Charmix. No, because that's not the root of her arc. It's a symptom. Flora actually gets her Charmix when she calls Helia back as he's leaving, and forcing herself to yell out that she loves him. It's that courage in allowing herself to be vulnerable that finally helps Flora unlock her Charmix. Her ability to be true to herself unlocks her inner strength. There is also convergence magic, which explores how the Winx work together with their magic. It goes hand in hand with them learning about themselves as individuals and getting their Charmix boosters. Note to self, get Pfizer boosters soon. When the girls are fighting, not communicating on what their goals should be, convergence backfires on them. But when they communicate actively, it becomes their strongest tool. I really miss the days when convergence was connected to the girls' growth as characters, rather than just a shallow way for them to win the day with a generic blast of light. So all in all, Season 2 is a blessing. It's the season most fans sleep on, and they need to stop. Because without Season 2, we wouldn't have the foundation that gave us Season 3, the movie, and Season 4. And I guess the rest of the show, but whatever. And honestly, the character writing and the balancing of the ensemble cast was at its strongest back in Season 2. And low-key, I want to go back to those days. Anyhow, if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this from me, then be sure to subscribe and ring that bell for notifications because YouTube hates creators. Also, please consider, if you are willing and able, pledging your support for myself and the channel over on Patreon, and checking out my debut urban fantasy novel, Disanerbus from the Ashes, in the description below. I'm the Unicorn of War, and Season 2 is not a shit show. It's an underrated masterpiece, and I love it.